that you have to get your hands dirty. You can't do a startup with a corporate mindset.
When people tell me that I can't do something, I will do whatever it takes to prove them wrong.
लाइफ में ना दो तरह से कॉम्पनसेट होते हो आप. वन इज योर अर्निंग एंड वन इज योर लर्निंग.
Fundamental each has always been khud karo.
I'm your host, Akshay Datt, and you're listening to Spotlight, a podcast in which I speak to disruptive startup founders.
Hi, I'm Pankit Desai, co-founder and CEO of an enterprise cybersecurity company called Sequretek.
Do you know what's common between Air India, MobiKwik, Domino's, and Airtel? Even though these companies have no relation to each other, but all of them fell victim to a hacking attack. In fact, India reports as many as 3,000 cases of hacking every day. Given the seriousness of this problem, it presents a great opportunity for a startup to help companies deal with cybersecurity risks, and which is where a company like Sequretek comes in. Sequretek was founded by Pankit Desai, a veteran of the software industry with almost 3 decades of experience with all the big names. And he started Sequretek with the aim of productifying the business of security. Listen on as Pankit helps us understand exactly what is cybersecurity and how he built a product-led business around helping companies to fix cybersecurity. What do you mean by security here? Are you talking of like getting hacked from that perspective, like helping companies to not get hacked, or virus protection, or
All of the above. So security is in the context of your entire digital footprint that one builds, and more so now in the COVID times where everything has gone digital, but helping you to understand the risk that manifests in your environment, both from an external in perspective or within the environment, right? There are malicious users within and outside, and they can then carry out attacks either knowingly or unknowingly within your environment, whether it is on your devices or your users or the networks or servers or whatever they might be. So helping customers respond to that, they understand where the attacks are coming from, identify them, and then respond to them is where we chose to play ourselves.
So this was a enterprise solution that you were thinking of. What was like the original idea? Like, what was the idea on which you started Sequretek?
So if you look at how security as an industry has evolved, it has always been what is called as a reactive responsive thought process. By which I mean is that every time a new problem gets unearthed, a new product comes out. Think about it in the 80s and 90s when EDP departments started solving problems of enterprises through technology. So you had a finance system, you had an HR system, you had a materials management system, you had a supply chain system, you had a CRM system. These were all siloed systems that came up because they had that specific problem of technology for that department was being addressed. Security also was like that. You are having an attack from outside, let me build an antivirus. I am using a lot of softwares that need to be patched, so I am building a patching system. I am worried about my data leaking, let me build a data leak expression. I am having network issues, build a network product. So every time the thinking was, let me see a problem, let me find a product. The thinking was never that, can I scale my existing technology to do this as well? That was never there. For 2 reasons. One, the products that were built in the first place were never built with scalability and extendability in mind. And second is that more often than not in security, innovation comes from outside, not within. More often than not, the solution to a new problem is done by a different company, different individual, not the same company. Both of these make the entire process of solving problem always in silos. And once you solve in silos, you can't bring it together. That's where the challenge comes in. So we felt that maybe because we are a late starter and we are not carrying a baggage. There is no baggage that we carry that I have to take care of this product also and this product also and this product manager and their department, their teams, and if I merge it together, what happens to the entire team? I have no such baggage. Can we, as a late starter, look at this entire problem in its entirety and build a solution that can kind of meet majority of the needs that the customers will have from a security perspective without overtly complicating the entire security landscape? That was the big picture idea. That's why It's almost like an oxymoron sentence, right? Simplify security, change the fundamental way in which security gets consumed. And then over a period of time, we kept evolving that idea to take it beyond just the software to the platform to service and a lot of other things. But fundamental ethos has not changed, that we've always kept the customer in the mind and not technology.
So tell me about the evolution of the product. What was version 1 that you launched with? Was it like a antivirus plus plus kind of a thing?
So what we did is that we knew, looking at my Rolta experience, we had realized that products take a while to fructify. You are a late starter. You are in a business that is inherently known for trust, right? So people buy security products and services from those folks who they are comfortable with. We felt that if we were to go in a stealth mode, let's say, and not disclose what we were doing and take 3 years to build something and launch it in the market, where will the acceptance be? Or will there be an acceptance? Instead, let's do one thing. We know the areas that we want to solve the problem in. So we had decided that we want to be in 3 areas. We want to be in what is called as an enterprise monitoring or enterprise security monitoring space. We want to be in the device security space, and we want to be in the user space. These are 3 broad areas that we'll identify for ourselves.
So can you break down what each of these mean? Like for someone who's for a layman, like what is enterprise monitoring? What is device monitoring?
So enterprise monitoring is what is called as a top-down view of security for an entire organization. An organization is a construct of what all? You have what is called as perimeter or boundaries. So boundaries are protected by devices like your firewall, IDS, IPS, all those gateway devices, proxies, email gateway. These are all things that make sure that your compound walls, your boundaries are well protected. That is one form of digital protection that companies have. Then you have data centers. The data centers has what? You have servers, you have your operating systems and databases and routers and switches. That's your data center environment. Then you have what is called as endpoints. Endpoints here are laptops and desktops. And then you have the users, right? Enterprise monitoring is the ability to look at your entire technology landscape from a 30,000 feet view, look at the data and help you understand if this landscape of yours is under attack or not. So collecting information from various different sources, then running a series of rules and algorithms to be able to identify behavioral differences that can be pinpointed to a certain attack. That's your enterprise monitoring.
Give me an example. How would it identify an attack? For example, would it notice that there is some data being uploaded from some node? Like would that be like a trigger, or like how would it detect that there's an attack happening?
Are you in Mumbai right now?
I'm in Japan.
You're in Japan. Okay. So Akshay is sitting in Japan. I'm assuming it's like what, 5:30, 5:15ish your time?
Yeah.
5:15 your time. You're logging into your network. And at 6 p.m., Akshay's credentials are being used to log in to the same network but from India. Akshay can't time travel. So in 45 minutes, there is no way he can from Japan land up in India. As far as your environment is concerned, your application may still allow you to have access because the user ID password was right. But your firewall or your gateway device would have known that Akshay's credentials were used to log in at 5:15 from Japan and 6 p.m. from India. These are geographically very diverse IPs, and there is no way this is right. So either the Japan one was wrong or the India one is wrong. So that's one example of user behavior anomaly. Someone creates a user ID in your application and deletes it in a couple of hours. No one creates and deletes an ID in 2 hours. Most likely it's an anomaly. It may be genuine also, but it's an anomaly also. Your laptop has never spoken to this server in its lifetime. Suddenly I'm seeing communication between your laptop and that specific server. It could be genuine, but most likely your server was infected, and that infected piece of software is now trying to migrate itself to the server to be able to attack that server. So there are things like these. So when I collect data from your enterprise, I have the ability to understand how across the enterprise some of these threats are moving back and forth, and then have the ability to identify. So that's your enterprise security monitoring. So we launched that service as one of the services initial days, so that it does two things. One, it makes me or it gives me access to the customers and the complete environment. I can build trust also. And I also knew that I was going to come out with a product in that area at some point in time. So I will get the full intel of how the problem manifests itself and therefore what my product should carry as a set of features. Similarly, we built a product in the area of what is called as endpoint or device security. Device in this case would be laptops, desktop servers. And here we were to build a product which was to secure this device from external and internal threats. So your antivirus, your patching systems, vulnerability systems, they were all going to be part of this product. So we started offering services to manage someone else's technology in customer environment. So in the process, we will know how our competitors were solving that problem, and therefore what we need to do better with our product. And the last area was all around users. So in large enterprises, what happens is that you are given access to systems and processes depending on your role and location. So you join the company, you get promoted, you get transferred, you leave the organization. Those accesses are changed. You need to make sure that as those changes are happening in your environment, those changes are reflected in the systems on which the user was supposed to be accessing. So in the intervening time, before the products came out, we wanted to be a part of that ecosystem by offering services on someone else's technology. So that way we build customer relationships, get access to the technology, and also give inputs to our product team so that they understand what they need to do.
How did you fund? Because you would have to, building a tech team in-house is expensive, right? The salaries and also. So was it purely savings or like?
Yeah, purely saving. The initial, for about a 2-year period, we self-funded the company. Then in 2016, we raised an angel round, friends and family. So we raised about 1.5 crore at that point of time. 2017 is when we raised our first VC funding for about $1 million. And then in 2018, we raised $4 million.
Okay. So when did the product launch finally? How much time did it take you to build the product?
The first product we launched was the access or the user governance. That was in 2016. 2017 and early 18 is when we launched the security monitoring capability.
Which is the enterprise security product.
Enterprise security. And then in 18 and early 19 is when we launched the endpoint security product.
Okay, which is for device.
For devices. And then just about 6 months back, we brought all of these technologies on together into a single platform, which is called as a Percept Enterprise Cloud Security Platform. Originally, there were still 3 distinct, now offered through a single platform so that we can deliver it. And again, this is more a COVID outcome because in COVID times, that's the only way one can consume technology. So this is more a COVID outcome than anything else.
Was it like instant success or did you face stumbles along the way when you launched these products? And tell me about that.
So we launched our access governance in 2016. Within about 6 months, the product didn't do well. So we had to scrap it and relaunch it with a completely new code base in early 17.
What was the problem? What did you figure out?
So the way we had written the code, absolutely not the way, it was not configurable, right? It was still mimicking what a custom implementation would look like. And when you start to scale, it becomes very, very difficult. Second, we chose Oracle as a database. And if the cost of the product is X from a license perspective, X by 2 was the cost of Oracle licenses. So the cost of ownership for customer becomes very, very high. And there was also by that time this whole change in the industry for identity governance, which was calling for what is called as a federated identity. It basically, instead of creating your own store for where you store all the identities, you don't fundamentally change how applications choose to operate. So all of these allowed us to rethink the problem statement and rebuild a product. So in 2017, we launched a new product. And since then, it has happened that we launched it, which has been very successful. Security monitoring, we have started with a third-party technology because we're offering services. We launched our own product. And because it was AI, initial days, while we were able to improve detection dramatically, we were also dealing with a lot of false positives. And because you crunch humongous amount of data, your big problem is false positives. And the issue with false positive is it demeans or it deteriorates the trust that the customer has on the outcomes. Because if I keep going back and saying there's a problem, there's no problem, after a time you'll get what's called alert fatigue. So that is what, and so every technology has its own troubles and tribulation. But the good part is that because you've gone through it once, you understand how to respond quickly. Second, you now start baking that failure into the launch process itself. That you really need to give it time, that something, in spite of all its testing and everything, something will not work out the way it is supposed to. And you will need to have its iterations till it stabilizes and it gets into market when it is fit.
With more companies going for pure cloud-based technologies, is there still a need for an enterprise security product? And I'll give you an example. For example, for my organization, we have a G Suite, so email and documents and everything is on that. And then we use Chromebooks. So again, Chromebooks are also like inherently more secure because it's largely on the cloud. There's hardly any hard disk space on it. So for such like cloud native organizations, is there still a need for like an enterprise security product, or is it more for legacy organizations which are using like, say, Windows laptops where a lot of data is on the device and stuff like that?
The way to look at it is that no company is completely a cloud organization, right? So first and foremost, even if you're a cloud organization, Google provides only the platform. That platform can be hacked. That platform has the same issues that a traditional on-premise data center environment is going to have. So as an example, let's say you have a Google Cloud. I log in from Japan into your Google Cloud at 1 p.m. and at 2 p.m. I log in from India using your same credentials.
But then Google sends alerts. No, you get like, if there's a new device that uses your Gmail, you get an alert.
So then you will need to configure the alerts, then someone has to monitor the alerts and someone has to respond to the alerts. There are certain set of, let's say even a Chrome is amenable to an attack, right? Because you have an operating system. Outside of Google Suite, you will use some CRM, you will use some finance application, you will use some, if you're using G Suite, then you're also using an email, but some productivity applications. The more environments that you plug in, the more exchange of data happens between the environments, the more chances it creates for someone to worry about. In case of enterprise environments, you also have an issue of something being on-premise and something being on cloud. So depending on how the structure, specifically now in this what is called a heterogeneous world, there's something on-premise, something cloud, and your endpoint sitting at home. You need to figure out how this entire environment is going to come together, who's going to configure the environment from a security perspective, who's going to monitor it, and if something was to change in your environment, how is that change factored in from a security point of view? So that is where the enterprise construct comes in. Yeah, so that's the story from the enterprise.
Okay. And what does the pricing look like? Like either individual products pricing or the platform pricing?
In case of monitoring, it will be the per source monitor. How many sources you would like someone to monitor. In case of device security, is number of devices monitored. In case of users, user governance, is the number of users that you want to cover through the access governance process.
But like, what is the range of pricing for these?
So typically, device monitoring, security monitoring will go between about $500 to about $1,000, depending on what you're monitoring per device per year or per source per year. The endpoint security will go between $40 to about $100 per device per year. Your access governance goes from about $25 to about $75 per user per year.
Okay. And this access governance will work with other. So say, for example, a company is using, say, Oracle, and it is also using Salesforce, and, so then the access governance will kind of integrate.
Yes. And your premise is that you will have a fairly heterogeneous environment, right? So you will have different types of technologies, different types of services. You need to be able to integrate with each of them and still be able to afford that single pane of glass through which they can view the entire enterprise.
Okay. And so how has your revenue been evolving? Like first year of business, how much did you do? And then how did that grow over the years?
Good times. It was, I think, about 10, 12 lakh rupees. It was only about 6 months of operation. It started in November. So first year was, I think, about 60 lakhs, it was a crore. So we've been growing at about 55% CAGR for the last 8 years. We closed our last fiscal at about 4 million ARR, recurring revenue. We're expecting to close our current fiscal at about 7.5, 8 million ARR. So we continue on the same growth curve.
And how has the lockdown changed your trajectory? Like, are companies now more conscious about security because people are working remotely, or how have things changed post the lockdown?
So COVID has been kind to security, if I'm going to use that word, for two reasons. One, digital transformation has accelerated dramatically for organizations. Right? Companies were hitherto not very, those at least who were not very keen to move their processes online had no choice but to move it online. Cloud adoption has increased dramatically. Work from home has meant that the infrastructure that was originally very closed to the process. As an example, let's say if you were to look at an NBFC. In NBFC, the folks who were not working from office were primarily the sales force and the management. But the loan processing, your appraisal systems, your credit processing, all used to happen in the office. Their systems were built primarily to be accessed only within the four walls of the office. COVID hit, all of that had to be exposed to the external world, right? So overnight, the risk that you carry as an organization increases dramatically. In a manufacturing company, your CRM and maybe your finance could be accessed remotely. But your manufacturing process, your accounts payable, your a bunch of other things were always close to the organization. Now they had to be exposed externally, right? So those are the changes that one sees in the market today that has resulted into a significant security risk. So if you were to look at my customer base, till pre-COVID was heavily banks, insurance, NBFC centric.
And India centric?
NBFCs, yeah, primarily India. Now last about a couple of years with US, Europe and all that, but otherwise primarily India. But in COVID times, I'm seeing more manufacturing, more pharma, retail, services. Those companies who would normally not have spent on security are spending on security.
Right. Okay. And what is your split between India and outside India in terms of revenues? Like
90% is India, only 10% is outside. So US is about a year and a half old story for us. And we just entered US just before COVID hit. So it's kind of put something, into a, so hopefully we'll resurrect now with that everything opening up there.
But why didn't you do global first approach? Because you have so much experience of selling in the US. So
actually, hindsight 2020, we should have. That's one regret that I have, that if we had started there, would have been much better off. The big issue that we grappled in was cost, in the sense, and maybe our own thinking or lack of, in the sense we thought that unless you are in front of a customer, the customer is not going to buy, specifically in the security world. And maybe whatever, all justifications and hindsight 2020, but we should have actually gone global first. It would have been a much different trajectory than what it is today.
Okay. So help me understand how enterprise sales happens. Like, what is the cycle of doing enterprise sales? Like, you're launching a new product. So there is no legacy to bank on. So how does enterprise sales happen for like a B2B company, like say, which has a SaaS product?
Depending on the stage where you are as a company, you will have different thought processes. So when you are an unknown entity, so let's say if I was to rewind myself back to 7 years or rewind myself to 2 years for the US market, we have always leaned in on people that we knew. Fortunately, Anand and I, we spent enough time in the industry, so we know folks whom we can call out on. And we were very clear that we will not do free pilots initial days. We will not give products free. We were okay with a 1 lakh rupee order also. If the product, the technology would have been worth even a crore, we were okay for a 1 lakh order, but we wanted someone to pay, because the only proof of pulling in anything is when someone pays. On both sides, on the customer side and on your side, because you also have to deliver to a timeline. So without money, there is no sanctity to the process. fortunately, we knew people who we could call out on and say, hey, you know what? Remember that favor I did you 10 years back? Just joking, but yeah. So you could reach out, you can ask for a leap of faith. We have been lucky. In fact, all of our technologies have always been, while baked in the lab, delivered in front of a first customer. So we actually finalize it, we garnish it, if you may, in front of a customer. So that is the thought process that we have as far as the initial set of wins are concerned. So if you look at most of my customers in the US and Europe, these are all my former customers in my past life. They may have changed the companies, but they are the folks that I knew, and that's how we built. And they will do their diligence and all of that. Not that anyone's doing a favor to the family; they are answerable to their companies. But you will deliver to the value proposition that they have. Once you have the initial set of wins, then the multiplier is in many folds, right? So then you use your traditional channels like inside sales for calling, you have your email, your digital marketing, your sales teams, channels, so we are very big in referrals. So even now, today's there are 115 odd customers that we have. I would say about 70-80% of them would have come through referrals. We are not shy of telling our customers, give me names of two of your friends who we will call and use your name as a referral, right? So we have been absolutely besharam, if I may say so, if I have to use that word. But we will say that if you like us so much, give me two friends of yours whom I can call, because nothing beats a referral in this business, in a B2B business. Once you are large enough, then you can have the multiplier effect. Then the system takes over and then you kind of drive the entire.
So how do you build a sales team? Like, how do you hire rockstar salespeople?
A challenge, big challenge in a startup environment. And it's a tough profession. Unfortunately, people don't want to take it up this generation.
Yeah, the MBA graduate, for him, sales is his last choice.
Last choice. And everyone thinks marketing and strategy is where it comes from. And I always believe that unless you are sold, you can't have a strategy. You got to meet a customer first. You got to sell something before you can say, this is my product strategy. But anyway, so it is tough. A lot of churn that we see. I would say for every 10 folks we'll interview, we'll probably hire one or two. Of every 10 that we hire, barely two make it to the cut.
But how do you decide whom to hire? Do you look at past network, like does he bring a network with him, or do you give them some assignment to do, or like, how do you judge that this is the person I want to hire?
What I've realized is, again, so let's say if you're working for a very large company, let's say, and if I'm hiring from that organization, more often than not, you don't own the relationship, the salesperson. Very rarely in a large company, you will anchor a relationship. So the chance of you transferring that goodwill to this organization is going to be very limited. Right? What you will transfer is an understanding of process and systems and structure, which is good for a leadership role, but not for a IC role. There are issues there also, because in a larger company, you will have the paraphernalia to work with. You have resources, financial or otherwise, to work with, which is always a shot in a startup world. That is as far as the goodwill part is concerned. On the operating level, the only thing I see is hunger. The moment a salesperson says, I want an 80% fixed salary, then to me, that is not a salesperson, because you're not thinking like a salesperson. All my life, I have worked on 50-50, 50 base, 50 variable. And I always tell all my houses and bungalows and cars and Sequretek happened because I cracked the incentives. Your target is 1, you do 5. Because on that extra 4, you make enormously large amount of money. And that's what allows you to build palaces. If you want 80% fixed, then on 20%, even a 5x return is only 100. Versus a 50, a 5x is 250. So you have a bad year, enough bad year. But you got to be in a place where you can crack. So attitude and the hunger that I'll crack the incentive policy. So the folks who I want is people who will ask me for an incentive policy, go through it threadbare and question and ask me, how will I make money on this policy? That too tells me that you understand how the selling process works. Because you can teach security, you can teach AS400, you can teach Java, everything else can be taught. It doesn't matter what you're selling. Because the hunger can't be taught, unfortunately.
Got it. Interesting. So how big is your team now, total headcount?
We are about 410, 15-ish.
And what is the split of these people?
So majority, I think about 40 are in the SG&A, sales, and the rest, all 370 of them are all product, services, technology, R&D, research.
How do you think the security industry is going to evolve with the increasing focus on privacy, like data privacy? And Europe already has these very strict laws. India is also talking about bringing in laws. So how do you think this industry is going to evolve and respond to these privacy related concerns?
Privacy is slightly different from a security thought process. So privacy compliance is more voluntary aspect of how you do business. It is, so let's say it would be more like a set of standards and systems and processes that someone will have to put into place to comply to some norm, whatever that norm is. A norm in India could be Data Privacy Act of India, it could be CDPL or something of China, GDPR of Europe, and so on and so forth. Norms are generally a reaction to what's happening from a transformation perspective. Right? So GDPR came much after the entire brouhaha around data and privacy and all of that happened with all these tech companies. And now what's happening in India is an outcome of what they are seeing with Facebook and WhatsApp and a bunch of this. Right? Privacy is more a voluntary concept. If it's involuntary, it becomes a law. Otherwise, it's basically saying that I will have your data secure, or I will only do so X, Y, Z with the data. And that's more a privacy concept. Security, on the other hand, is more a defensive concept. It's more a concept of protecting against malicious actors. Doesn't matter whether you have privacy compliance or not. Both will have their own trajectory. One is regulatory activism driven. Other is market dynamics and forces driven. So market dynamics and forces could be China and US have a problem. Suddenly you will start seeing attacks going back and forth. Russia is having a problem with the US. They will start seeing attacks galore. Right? It is nothing to do with what the privacy norms are going to be for that point of time. Both will give a rise to a significant investment in security. There is no question about that. Right? You will need to do protection. You will need to build defensive systems. You will need to do proactive activities on the organization to be able to identify threats. What is also changing is the second market dynamic or third market dynamic. So regulatory actors is one. The cybersecurity or the hacker world or the state actor world is one. The third dimension is the digital transformation. Right? The pace at which the economies are getting digitized. Today, any industry has a tech attached to it. EdTech, EdTech, MedTech, MoTech, GovTech, you name it, everything is tech. A car is a tech more than a vehicle, right? That is a Tesla has some 80 moving parts. That's it. Everything else is a computer, right? When tech is an essential part of how you choose to do business, and they are all integrated and interlinked as part of one ecosystem, you are potentially exposing yourself as a company, city, state, nation, whatever, to a significant potential continuity or a business continuity issue. Right? A colonial pipeline goes down with a ransomware attack has significant impact not just on supply of gasoline in the eastern parts of the US, but you have an issue of back pressure that gets built on into the wells, and the wells have a problem. The wells go down, you can have potential health issue that may come up, something will blast, some people will lose lives. A lot of that could happen, right? Or for that matter, the power shutdown that happened in Mumbai of 6 hours during the COVID times is also attributed to a cyber attack, right? Now in COVID times, hospitals need power, ICUs need power goes away. You may have to climb 20 floors, which is what I had to do for my building, that's okay. But in an ICU, there's no power. You will have patients die, right? Because tech is a part of how you deliver healthcare now, right? That's the problem, right? Tech is how you deliver gasoline. The tech is how you get your cars going. Tech is how I remember. This must be 2004 or 5. There was a major power outage in New York. The entire eastern seaboard had gone. Toilets had backed up because toilets operate through sensors, right? You can't wash your hands. You can't flush your toilets. Because that red light is the what senses whether standing or sitting. Nothing is flushing the ship, right? That's it. I mean, that's how dependent we have become on technology, right? So forget anything else. You can't even. So we do not realize how integrated tech is part of our lives, and that's the third wheel of this problem that one will have to understand, which will in turn result into security challenges.
Okay. Recently, MobiKwik got hacked. No, I believe their users' information was leaked. Also, was it because they were not using an enterprise security product, or like what went wrong there? Like,
I don't know, so I can't comment on that part. But generally speaking, the startup or this new age economy companies have not looked at security as an essential element of building their business, right? And I can understand because you have only so much money to go after or available rather. You will spend it into what? So for them, customer acquisition, launching a new product, a lot of that is taking precedence. And compliance, so they come under RBI. So I'm sure there's an RBI compliance requirement. More often than not, compliance, when you think of security from a compliance perspective, you will do only what is needed to be compliant. You don't tick mark, right? So I want to get over the RBI audit, and that's about what it is. I'm not saying that they did that or not. I have no locus standing one way or the other, but I'm assuming that's what it ends up happening, right? And the second problem in this country, specifically in India, is there is no penalty whatsoever, right? So let's say a billion records or a million records get leaked. So let's say for every record, if they were to be fined 1,000 rupees, let's say, that's 100 crores. Next time, security will get bought. No questions asked. But nothing happens. Not even a slap on the wrist, right? It's not that the IPO will be cancelled or they will not get the rest on the funding. So there is no penalty attached to it. Fear drives maximum investment. And because fear doesn't exist, it's okay. I mean, one bad name, one bad press, it's okay. We'll forget it, move on. There are companies that have been repeatedly hacked. Forget about them. They've been repeatedly hacked. But nothing changes, right? So, in India. So once the Data Privacy Act, there was, I think, Big Basket had two of them. Then you had one more other company, three of them. It doesn't matter, right? But with the Data Privacy Act, hopefully, as and when it sees the light of the day, whenever it does, because there the penalties are steep. It's 5% of your gross revenue, right? Plus jail terms for the CEOs. People drive behaviors. Because at the end, you are answerable. I mean, what is my recourse if my data got stolen? If I was in MobiKwik, first of all, MobiKwik is not even required to let me know that my data has been stolen. Forget anything else. No communication comes to, I am a Nepalese customer. I have not received any communication telling me that I have been hacked or whether I was hacked.
So in addition to hacking, what are the other kind of threats that enterprises face?
It could be financial fraud, right? Someone will, there's a very classic case, if you get time, look at this company, I think called Technimont Spa, I think so, or Techimont Spa. It's an Italian company. Their Indian subsidiary was hacked. I shouldn't say it's a brilliant attack, but it is a brilliant attack. You just admire sometimes the ingenuity of people and how they do stuff. So this guy, the CEO of the company, gets a call from the chairman of the Italian the holding company, saying that, hey, we are looking to acquire a company in Asia Pacific, and we want to route that acquisition through India. So you are in the esteemed league of people that will be part of this close-knit group that will be required to do this. And the Indian company will create a separate group, and you'll be talking to that group. And then the communication starts. Then they have conference calls. They have these lawyers that come in, and there's some every 2 weeks conference calls happening. And this goes on for a few months. And then one fine day, he gets a message saying that, okay, the deal is to be done. And because it is to be done, we need to now pay the lawyers. And the lawyers, this is the leverage, this is the amount. So pay, I think he paid $2.5-3 million or something like that. Or probably more, somewhere that is what the lawyer fees are. The guy paid the fees, and then it's all quiet. So he's thought that there's a quiet period or something. Then he finally reached out to the next chairman. The chairman said, what deal? I never reached out to anyone. So that's financial fraud. There is this case where a disgruntled employee of, I think it's GVK Pharma or something, in public case, I can only talk public cases. So he had an affair with someone, he gets thrown out of the company. Before leaving, he downloads information and sends it to some FDA authorities of some 26 countries about the violation that GVK Pharma had on their drug manufacturing. So they had to shut down the plants. The data can be used or misused or abused in varieties of ways. Right? So it could be financial fraud, it could be data theft, it could be bringing your systems down. Dr. Reddy's got shut down for 5 days because of ransomware. They won't ship anything of their plants.
And ransomware is typically when a virus takes over your system and you are unable to do anything on it.
Yes, it will hold you for a ransom. But again, it's a fairly evolved process. Ransomware is not a 0-1 because they need to target the system, or they would rather bring down a system for which you are going to pay ransom. If it is your admin's machine and there's a ransomware attack, you don't give a damn, you just format the machine. But if it's CEO's machine, or if it's your core ERP server or your core banking server or your email server, then you will pay money because without that you can't function. Right? So it depends on, so the entire ransomware process is to infect somewhere, but then to move within the environment to find that specific place of weakness for which you will actually pay money.
Okay. So hackers also use like a whole series of tools to do their hacks, right? It's not like just one man sitting alone and doing it anymore, right? I mean, a lot of hackers are now like state-sponsored teams of highly qualified engineers.
That is true, but more often than not, it's just the bots. There is no human also. They have used AI better than the security companies using AI. Let me put it They have figured out how to use technology to their advantage.
Right. So what's the roadmap for Sequretek going forward? Do you want to just press the pedal on sales and expand territories and clients, or do you want to also expand the product offerings?
So the products themselves have a roadmap, and a lot needs to be done, and we have the roadmap for the next 2 years in terms of enhancements. So one big one was this launch of cloud, which was achieved this year, and there's a bunch of things that happen along with it. There is an aspiration to go down the IoT security route, so somewhere in the next fiscal, that's an area of interest. So product enhancements, new journeys will continue. But the biggest thing that we want to achieve is globalization, right? So building the US market is what of essential and utmost interest right now for us as a company. The US presence, followed by Europe, Middle East, Africa, is where we want to be. In the next 24 to 36 months, that's going to be the single-minded focus.
So by when do you think you'll cross 100 million ARR?
God willing, 3 years.
Wow. Okay. So from 8-9 this year to 100, that's like a phenomenal.
Yeah, I would say that's the advantage of product. I mean, if you see all of these companies that have scaled, either you will do it or you will never do it. Let me put it that way. Because then you will always stay middling. So the game is you have a hockey stick and you leverage that hockey stick, and obviously you raise decent amount of money and all that. The product has delivered what it is supposed to do. Then you've got to really press the pedal and get to that. Otherwise, you will stay in that 30-40% growth and it'll be okay, but you are not going to see to that level that the company's potential is going to be.
So what have been your lessons as a founder over the last 5-6 years that you've been a founder? You know, like what are your takeaways which you would like to offer to other people who are just starting their journeys as founders?
A few. First and foremost, it is fairly, they always say it's lonely at the top, but it's very lonely in startup. Because what ends up happening in a startup versus a regular enterprise is that in startup, you will have the top and the bottom is generally, there's a huge gap from a experience, capability, specifically if you are a founder who's spent 10, 15, 20 years in the industry and started out. What ends up happening is a huge gap between what you bring to table and the people that you hire. And therefore, the number of roles that you end up doing is quite more than what you would have done in any other role or any other environment. Even if you're a CEO for, let's say, a large corporate. But you have the team there, right? You have the CFO and the head of sales and the head of marketing and HR and a bunch of guys there. And yes, it is lonely, but there is an extended team. There is no extended team in a startup. So the first thing I would say is that because of that environment, having a partner in crime, as they say, is absolutely essential. Because there'll be more down days than up. There will be more lonely days than together. There will be more issues that one can handle. And you need, if nothing else, a shoulder to cry on or a shoulder that's going to pep you up at that point of time. And if the founder brings complementary skill set, just like in our case, between Anand and I mean, I'm perennial optimist. He's a realist. He's tech plus people. I am numbers and sales. I have done global. He's done India. Right? So this fortunately just worked out that way. But having people with complementary skills who bring some things to table is absolutely essential. And there is this question that happens of diluting of equity and I need to give something away. But I always say, 10% of 10 is more than 100% of 0. Right? At the end, the company has to do well, right? So you got to make sure that you have enough things that you do. So having a co-founder, absolutely essential.
Right. Okay. So what is the split between you and your co-founder? Like, what do you look after? What does he look after?
So mine is primarily sales, finance, IR. That's my responsibility. His is product, delivery, vision, people. That's his strength.
But then you got lucky, right? In the sense that your co-founder is also a family member. There are enough number of cases where startups fail because of co-founder issues.
Oh, yes, they do. They do. But statistically, most startups fail when they are single-person startups than multi-person startups. It is just, when you really need to have very, very broad shoulders to carry it off individually. So I'm part of this group called Ascent, run by Harsh Mariwala. And we are a bunch of entrepreneurs who kind of congregate every month. It's a small, close group. And there are a lot of the single-person companies, and I see them struggle. I really see them struggle on their bad days. And we try becoming their helping hand, but we are not the full time. Yeah, so that'll be one. The second I would say is customer money is much better than a VC money. Please find, as I said, it doesn't matter how much that money is. Some money is always good. So try and get that money because that's the only proof of the pudding that your pudding is eatable.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
This was The Spotlight, presented by The Podium. To listen to more such interesting conversations, log on to thepodium.in.